Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. This will be a nice little dry run for one version of what I'm apparently giving at Quills. So look forward to that. Okay, so our objectives for today, we're going to define fandom and fan fiction. We're going to identify examples of fan fiction in popular culture. We're going to understand the basics of fandom culture. We're going to identify reasons to write fan fiction as a romance writer. Identify ways to write fan fiction effectively. We may not get to that last one because I was having some heartache over that slide, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. As far as who I am, my name is Anna Bessesen. I use they them pronouns. I'm a queer and non-binary humanoid. I am a public school educator. Just for the fun sauce, I am a PADI certified open water mermaid instructor. Try saying that 5 times fast. I'm an award-winning short story author. I am a fan author with over 2.5 million words of published fan fiction, and I've been a member of fan communities for over 2 decades. So, we're going to start by defining what fandom is. So, most generally, a fandom is a community of fans participating in fan activity and interacting with each other in some way, whether through discussions or creative works. This interaction can be face to face, at gatherings such as conventions, or written communication either off or online. Um, that is kind of the fundamental grounding in what fandom is. Real quick, because I know this didn't make it into my slides, why it matters to writers is that fandom, as it says, is kind of based on we're a fan of something. And so whenever you get published, you're going to have fans of your writing and they're going to potentially build up a fandom of your work. So it's something to be at least passingly aware of. So fan fiction specifically can be defined is usually fantasy or science fiction written by a fan rather than a professional author, especially that based on already existing characters from a television, book series, book, film, etc. Also a piece of such writing. So that's one definition. Also been defined as stories involving popular fictional characters that are written by fans and often posted on the internet. Not always, though, and I will cover that later on. Also, fiction written by a fan of and featuring characters from, again, a particular TV series, movie, etc. So, like it sounds, it's grounded in an existing work and takes the opportunity to expand on or completely alter what we might find in the original work itself. So, for examples of fanfiction in popular culture, I'm going to start with the Aeneid. Like, this is one of the oldest examples of a fanfiction ever. It took the existing Odyssey story and redid it. If you've ever heard of the musical Hades Town, this is, of course, a reimagining of Greek culture. Or Greek, not culture, I lost the word. Oh my gosh. Gods and goddesses. Mythology. That's the word I was looking for. Greek mythology. Great show. An absolute favorite of my housemate, and she would kick my butt if I didn't include it in here. So, love me some Hades Town. Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies is one of my favorites because it takes, again, existing work and tweaks it a little bit to make it something different and interesting. And of course, we cannot avoid the multiple reinterpretations of Shakespeare. This is from an iteration of Romeo and Juliet. So, very important. These are kind of in some things that are not as modern, but that still have repercussions for, that started as something not as modern and have been reimagined in modern culture. We can also talk to, in a similar way, starting with older works. Oh my gosh, you guys, my brain is so empty right now. Um, German fairy tales, such as Snow White. Okay, and so Disney built its entire empire on old fairy tales and reimagining them in something a little more modern. And if you want to go a step further, those of you that are familiar with the TV show Once Upon a Time took those Disney properties and reimagined them again. So fan fiction can become iterative. It doesn't have to just be a one and done thing. It can grow and grow and grow. Building on that, those of you familiar with Smallville is, of course, a reimagining of the superhero Clark Kent. And it's done so by taking his younger version of himself and examining how that younger version might have looked. This idea was again iterated into the Merlin TV show, where we took a younger version of Merlin and King Arthur and examined what their lives might have been like through an alternative lens. And we can't forget good old Hamilton, which is a reworking of literal history. Reworking of literal history into something that kind of allows for a reclaiming of our history by people of color. So we love Hamilton. And of course, no presentation would be complete without an overview of the absolute sheer number of iterations of Sherlock Holmes that exist. So, again, fanfiction exists in popular culture. Reimaginings of existing works exist in popular culture. Mainly what they do, though, is they rely on works that are out of copyright or that are in the public domain. That's what allows them to be these reimaginings of existing stories. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions up to just those basic outlines and definitions.
Anna, I have a comment. Is that kind of like the Jane Austen stuff too? Because there's a herd of that as well, isn't there?
I don't know what are you talking about, the Pride, Prejudice, and Zombie style works, or I guess I'm not familiar with.
Well, Pride and Prejudice Zombie is one of it, but Jane Austen, there's a lot of that there too. I was thinking about P.D. James's take on things that PBS made into a mini series, right? But
yes,
normal Pride and Prejudice is out there, besides the zombie, because Jane Austen's more than 200 years old, right?
So I'm of two minds about that. Yes, if it's a reimagining of that story, of that foundational storyline or narrative, then yes, that would fall into what I would consider fan fiction. I would more, if it's a remake, that to me is different than fan fiction. But again, that's a personal line that I draw in the sand. You could absolutely draw it as consider remakes to be fan fiction as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Of course. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? Okay, beautiful. All right, some real quick definitions. AO3 is a website that offers non-commercial and non-profit central hosting plays for fan works using open source archiving software. So I'll talk more about why AO3 is so important later on, but the important thing to know right now is it's just kind of a place where you can take any specifically fan fiction, but generally any fan work, and post it to the internet there. That's where my works are primarily posted.
Oh yeah, they will take.
And on AO3, yeah, they literally will. They literally will. That they're because their whole thing is they don't censor writers. Period. End of discussion. So that's AO3. AO3, like a lot of websites, uses tags, which again is a classification system of different either articles or in this case works used by authors to inform readers about the content of a piece of fan fiction. And AO3's tag system is like it's top notch. It is run largely by a group of fan. They're called tag wranglers. So anytime a tag shows up that is not a tag that's already in the system, they will wrangle it either into an existing tag or into like a dump tag. So they're like, this tag doesn't have any meaning, so like don't use it to categorize this work. And this like there are libraries that study how AO3's tagging system works because it is so complex and the architecture is so powerful and it just has such a robust system. So tags on AO3 are super, super important. The next two things I'm going to talk about are canon and fanon. Canon is generally what fans agree actually happened in a film, television show, novel, comic book, etc. So what's the text on the page? That would be your canon. Fanon is the accepted truth of a fandom as mythologized by fans of the film, television show, novel, comic book, etc. So this is things where, and we'll talk about some of these examples later, but anything that's not in the text, but that most of the fans agree is true, would be considered fanon. One other type of fanfiction that I want to zoom in on is the AU, or alternate universe fanfiction. This is any setting that does not strictly match canon for that fandom. Now, you could say any piece of fanfiction is an AU. We tend to refer to AUs more as things that are widely divergent from the canon itself. So, like if you look at Percy Jackson, you might look at a mundane AU where where their parents aren't gods. Or if you're looking at my current show is about a bunch of first responders, and if I take those first responders and I put them into a coffee shop, that's not their normal setting. If you look at Star Trek and you put them in a library, that's not their normal setting. So those would be an alternate universe type of story that we see in fandom. And you may or may not be familiar with the concept of shipping. There's a lot of divergent ideas about where this term came from, but at the most fundamental, it's about exploring the potential for a romantic relationship between characters that may or may not be involved romantically in canon. A lot of folks argue that this just comes from the end of the word relationship, and that shipping is just where it came from. Some folks point to the Pokemon fandom as an origin of this term because they had some very creative ship names. So you get disagreement about fandom history, but it's a term that's used pretty widely these days. Okay, the next term that's important for my purposes is cisgender, which is a person that identifies with their gender assigned at birth. And then the reason I bring that up is because of the role of gender bend and queering of characters, which is where you take the characters who are perceived to be cisgender and or straight in canon, and then they are no longer portrayed as cisgender and or straight in the fan piece. So if you look at the image on the screen, I've got the two characters on the left with the brown hair and the long green hair. Those are in canon both girls. And the two on the right, short green hair and blonde hair, those are both boys. We examine, and this work is actually done by the original artist himself. He did this art, and you can see our two on the left are now in the middle and the top right. They've got short hair. They don't seem to have breasts, and presumably they're boys in this context. Our two on the right in the original piece are now on the bottom, and they both clearly have breasts, and they look like women. So, and then that one on the top left, don't ask me how he landed in this particular iteration. I love that character, but when converted to a woman, I just have questions sometimes. I have questions sometimes. The hair is too much for me. So this whole idea of taking a character that is canonically male or female and changing that identity, or even taking a character that's canonically cis and saying, oh, this character is actually transgender, that would be an example of gender bending or queering a character. And another really important type of bending is race bending, which is in a fan work where characters are portrayed as white in canon are no longer portrayed as white. So again, Wonder Woman as Serena Williams, as a black woman, would be a race bending iteration of this character. I think that's the last of my definitions. Yeah. So I'm going to pause and see if anybody would like elaboration on any of those definitions or if they have any questions. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Then I'm going to start talking about modern fandom, culture, and community. So I spoke earlier that not all fan fiction has been published online, and honestly, the reason for that is that when fandom or modern fandom began, it was with the housewives that watched the original Star Trek series. They would write stories, put them in letters, envelopes, and mail them to each other. Or big envelopes if it was a big story, and literally mail these stories to each other because that was how they were able to share with each other. And these are the people that were the letter writing campaign that got Star Trek an additional season at one point. And these women saw the potential for a romantic relationship between Kirk and Spock. And that is kind of like, those of us that are largely in fandom these days look to these women as kind of the originators of modern fandom because they took what they saw on the screen, extrapolated, and said, no, this is the reality that I see. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Okay? This origin expanded with the invention of the internet, of course. Creators took to message boards, forums, personal websites, other online spaces to share their love of now all kinds of different media. I discovered fandom through someone's personal website where they had posted fan fiction for an anime that I loved. And that was how I was able to start my journey as becoming someone that's been in fan culture for over 20 years. And then we have seen the loss of many, many fan works due to censorship on websites like fanfiction.net, LiveJournal, so on and so forth. Um, a lot of the times due to corporate or strong social pressure influences. And I've listed just a couple of the most prominent ones here. Fox issued cease and desist efforts in the 1990s. Strike Through and Bold Through were both on LiveJournal. Fanfiction.net had 2 NC-17 purges, and Tumblr had a NSFW content purge as well. So this was kind of what was the initiation of the desire to have an archive of our own, an AO3 type situation, so that we could have a place where we as fans knew that our work would be protected and it wouldn't be taken down without warning. So now, fan fiction specifically can widely be found on AO3. You can also find fan fiction on things like Wattpad, Dreamwidth, Tumblr. Tumblr and Twitter are more limited in what they can do with their word count or their space options. But those are other places you can find works of fan fiction. So throughout all of this, we can see that fandom really originated in the idea of community and is only functional when we continue to focus on the role of community. Because it's when we build each other up and communicate with each other that we're able to build a positive fan community. So, what does fan fiction actually provide to authors? Fanfiction provides authors with a pre-existing audience. One thing we all know as traditional authors is that it's hard to find your niche, and it's hard to find readers that will connect with what you've chosen to write. And so with fandom, you already have the opportunity to say, I'm writing for the House MD series, or I'm writing for the Friends series. And people that like that show will come to you and say, show me what you got. And can I enjoy your stories with you? So that elicits a built-in connection to community. It allows for communication between writers and their readers much more easily than in traditional publication. In traditional publication, you kind of have to go looking for reviews, other than those ones you get initially. And oftentimes they're not super, not oftentimes, sometimes they're not super nice or what you wanted to read in the first place. Comments, 99 times out of 100, are kind and supportive, and like even if it's just like a little heart, I can say, oh, this person read and enjoyed what I did. And building on that, you can get feedback and support a lot more readily. Those of you that know about like conversion in advertising will be hopefully a little excited to hear that conversion rate in fan fiction. So if you look at like views to likes functionally, it like a 3% ratio is low, whereas in the advertising world, like a 0.1% ratio is something to be excited about. A 5% to 7% ratio on likes to hits is pretty common, and I've had works that are well over 12% and stay at well over 12%. So the level of engagement with your works is just so much higher and really powerful in helping you develop that confidence and that thick skin that you need as a writer. Okay. It also again provides the opportunity to write existing characters and settings. This one I'm hoping will be familiar to you as romance writers. Trigger warnings are very common. Not common. There's 4 trigger warnings that are required on any AO3 piece. You can opt out of that, but you have to actively opt out of it to say, I'm not going to tell people there's something triggering in this work. Then again, the tagging system makes it easier for people to find your work and follow you. And then it also allows the opportunity to work outside of culturally accepted and publishable norms. Things that we wouldn't see published traditionally or even in anything mainstream can be posted and left up on a website like AO3. Even more fun for me, we all love writing our own stories, but there's something about looking at a story that's already there and reshaping it in our own image that is just so powerful and so poignant, especially when we're bringing certain identities to the page. We can share stories in a community and share experiences with characters that we're already deeply in love with. Um, I particularly love the Magneto Xavier graphic here because you think about Magneto's origin story and you're like, well, that's not going to work for someone that's not from that's not Jewish, and you can wiggle and be like, oh, he's totally Jewish too, or you can be like, this is an Asian individual. How does his life look different than traditional Magneto's? How does it look the same as traditional Magneto's? What is the powerful part, and what are the through lines that makes Magneto Magneto? Same with Xavier. Xavier leverages his privilege all the time. But what kind of privilege do you have as a black man? I mean, that's a very different world you would tackle. And Xavier would have to work in a very different way. But again, his morals, his ideals, his underlying characterization can stay the same. So looking at how to take the things that are familiar and play with the parts that you don't want to keep was one of my personal favorite parts of writing fan fiction. And then again, it becomes super important for marginalized communities, as I've been talking about throughout. I've talked about Kirk Spock, queer representation. Like, fandom was doing it before it was on the shelves, focusing on characters of color that maybe got shortchanged in a fandom. I'm not naming names, but maybe I'm naming names. You can recast characters to be black or Indian or Latinx or whatever you want to do. You can examine mental illness, physical disability, and really look at own voices representation without any barriers to that representation. Yes, I put Tony on here twice. He's my little baby. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. I've talked a lot about what fan fiction is and what it can do for writers. Do you have any questions on that much so far?
Anna, I've heard some writers say that it makes them a better writer because they are free and they can experiment. What do you say to that?
I absolutely agree. I think it's obviously not one and done thing. I definitely have found that it limits me in certain ways, but it also, I mean, I would not have the confidence to work on my debut novel without the time and effort that I put into learning how to be a writer, period. I think for people that write in strictly canon stories, world building can become really challenging. For people that don't include original characters, building a character can become challenging. But the sheer act of putting words on the page, putting pen to paper, putting fingers to keys is absolutely something I would not have gotten without fan fiction.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Okay, so then we want to look too at fandom impact on popular culture. So I showed on this last slide a picture of Hermione as a black woman and Harry Potter as an Indian man. Again, we all have our issues with Harry Potter, do or we don't, but we can't deny that it's a cultural powerhouse. And when we get to the theater show that was produced maybe half a decade ago, 8 years ago, something like that, a black actress was cast to play Hermione, potentially because so many fans were like, this just makes sense. You talk so much about Hermione's hair, you talk so much about how much how much it bothers her, you talk about how big her nose is initially, like how big her teeth are, like these things, like we can look at these things and say, I can see these things in a black woman just as easily or easier than I see them in a white woman. So why can't we just let Hermione be black? I love Harry as an Indian man because one of the things that pops up in the stories all the time is that when Harry is Lord Voldemort, he looks at his hands and he goes, "Oh, they're so white, they're so pale." Well, if you're a white man, would you notice that? But if you're an Indian man, you look at your hands and they're the wrong color. That's something you're going to pay a lot more attention to. So you can look to the text and actually see the reason that these things, could be considered as a potentially realistic interpretation of the stories at hand. And you can look at that and you can, wonder, like, having a black actress play Hermione, could that have led to having Ariel cast as a black actress on, having a black Ariel appear on screen? Could that have been part of it? Like, the that sheer component of elevating black individuals is not something that can be overlooked, and we can't ignore that fandom had a part in that. And then for you specifically, your characters will be shipped together when you publish your book. Period. End of discussion. Like whoever it is that reads it, hopefully they'll be shipping the way that you've written them. They may not. They may so. Who knows? But that focus on the romantic component is not something we can ignore or deny the existence of in our writing. Okay, now I've talked a lot of hype about fandom. I can't be genuine or honest with myself without saying there is a darker side to fandom, just like there is to everything. People get really, really into their fanon, and really into their shipping goggles, and they have very strong feelings about who should go out with who, and what's real and what's canon and what's not canon, and how do we know it's canon, and you get these lovely things called ship wars. And by lovely, I mean terrible. I hate them. I'm in the middle of one right now, and I just want to sit in my corner and not have to worry about my boys. I just want to make my little Ken dolls kiss in peace. They won't let me. So this is something you need to be aware of if you're going to choose to venture into the land of fandom. Is that it's not all sunshine and roses. There are some people that will have opinions, and they will come and tell you their opinions very firmly. It doesn't happen as often as I think it does in the wider writing world, but it certainly does happen. So I just want you to be aware that this is an element of the community that you would be entering if you choose to write fan fiction, which you can choose to or not to. But I just want to just give a little disclaimer before I said any more really, really effusive things about fandom. Okay. Which is especially important given that my next slide is why write fan fiction as a romance author. I've mentioned shipping earlier on, and a lot of fan fiction readers are looking for romantic arcs in their fan fiction. So honestly, sometimes if you have a piece of fan fiction that's just like a general, like an ensemble piece or something to that effect, people won't read it as much because they're looking for a relationship that they're really invested in. Which is a big boon to you guys because it gives you a really accessible, possible way to practice writing romantic arcs at whatever length you want. You're not going to be trying to fit a publisher's standard. You're not going to be trying to fit socially expected norms. Like, I've written pieces that are like awkwardly like 12,000 words. Like, it's not a novella, but it's not a short story, but it fits in fandom world. I've written pieces that were like 120,000 words, and I'm like, this would not get accepted for publication anywhere unless it was a fantasy epic, which it was not. So, but again, it has a place in the fandom world. So again, readers are looking for that romantic arc, and it's a great place to practice. And because you have a little more flexibility in your length, you can practice the beats of a novel or a short story in a context where you're not trying to sell it to somebody. A little bit less pressure. And then again, we've talked about how hard it can be to get your works out to the readers that want to read them. Readers can find you much more easily because of the way you tag your pieces, the way you utilize the tagging system. That can allow you to be more accessible to people that would want to share your joy. Okay, so I've done the good, the bad, the ugly. Any questions on those last two slides? Okay, beautiful. And yes, I had to put my current boys on this slide. They're super cute. Okay, now speaking to craft development, which is a little bit what you were asking about earlier, Virginia, is like, how does writing actually develop your craft? And when done with intention, I believe that fanfiction is a powerful tool to develop your skills as a writer. I right now am in the process of writing what I'm hoping will be my debut novel. It is my second attempt at an original novel. The first one I was not writing for myself, so it didn't go very far. But this one I'm writing for myself, so I'm hoping it'll be a little more successful. But again, I've already published over 2.5 million words, to say nothing of the words that got scrapped along the way or never made it to AO3's pages, things I wrote before I was involved with AO3. Here in common knowledge as writers that writing 1 million words is supposed to be some essential goal that we should all attain to before we do anything quote unquote professional. So imagine how much good writing more than twice that was for my skill as a writer. Many fanfiction authors are not looking to be published traditionally or to the wider public, which makes fandom a potential place to write and get feedback as you progress through your journey as an author. So again, it can absolutely be a strong place to develop your craft and build certain elements of your understanding, and you can also leverage it when you know you have a skill that's weak. So like I love writing alternate universe pieces, so my world building skill is pretty strong. But I hate adding in original characters because developing them is so frustrating and time consuming to me. Like I want to just know who my character is. And so I've had to work on adding in original characters and intentionally including characters that I would not have included otherwise, so that I could develop that skill, and I could do it in a low, a not very threatening, low threshold kind of way. Then I just wow, that went way faster than I thought it was going to, but we'll just chat for a while after this. One last time about community. You all have clearly found a community here with the romance chapter. That's just one community you have access to. You can go and find so many more communities in fandom. If you have, as my friend Rosie would say, two characters that you would like to, or as really as Rosie would say, two little Ken dolls that you want to smush together and say now kiss. I wanted to do that. I should have put in that gif from Tangled where they've got the two little characters and he's squishing them together. That's what fandom is. You just put your characters together and say now kiss. Which really, what is romance other than that? At the end of the day. Um, Kirk Spock, as I said, is touted as the origin of modern fandom, and it's still bringing fans together today. I love this story. There was a woman who was part of the original letter writing campaign for the original Star Trek series. So it kind of drifted, life happened. And then when the 2009 movies came out, um, she was able to like reconnect with this part of her history, um, and like she had social media, she had a Tumblr, she gave all kinds of advice to young writers, like she was super open. And when she passed, her daughter posted on her Tumblr and basically said, "My mom had a much better quality of life, end of life quality, because of you guys, because you were here and you built a community with her and for her, and that just made her life so much better." So this goes beyond just writing, which I hope most writing does, that it transcends just the words on the page. And I know that fan fiction has absolutely done that. So again, no community is perfect, but fandom can be a powerful community for your writing if that's something that interests you. I think I then just have sources for all my artwork. So that is all I have in what I was going to present. I have a couple other slides that I pulled. If you guys want me to go over those, I can, but I figured I'd stop here and see what y'all are thinking, wondering, processing. Oh, is that good? No questions.
Who's the ship you write about the most?
Right now, it's Buck and Eddie from 911.
Mm.
My most published ship on AO3 is Steve and Tony from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, which I know is the wrong ship for the MCU. I fully understand that. Steve and Bucky is the right ship for the MCU. I know that. And yet. So.
I've been interested in fan fiction for a long time, and I'm surprised at the number of authors who actually admit to writing fan fiction. I am, of course, having a mental block as to who they are, but I know that several of my favorite romance authors do secretly write fan fiction.
Yeah, well, and one of my favorites is Naomi Novik, who has the AO3 user number 7, which is the lowest user number we think we can find on AO3. The first, maybe it's 8, 7 or 8, and like the previous 6 or 7 were all like test usernames. She was a founding member of the board, like, and she's a very well known author.
Really?
So.
I didn't know she was on there. That's so cool.
Oh yeah. She's a big name. If you yeah. If I told you who she was, you might be surprised. So
I love Temeraire.
yeah. Her fanfics. I fell in love with her fanfics before I even like started considering reading her books. So. And that's the thing too, is like if you build up a following in fanfiction, you're willing to connect that to your real world, which I'm not. Like I really am not. Some of the stuff that I write. If you're willing to make that connection, you get crossover fans. So, powerful that way too.
That's fun. I was introduced to fan fiction several years ago because I watched Legend of Korra and the final episode, and they hold hands and they walk into the light, and I went, "Where's the freaking kiss? Where is it?" And so I went online. I was like, did my streaming service cut off? You know, because sometimes that happens with some of the extra bits at the end. And so I was like, I was going all over. I was like, where is this? I need to find this. Where is this? And so I stumbled onto, I think it was AO3. It might have been fanfiction.net, but I think it was AO3. Eventually I made it onto AO3. And I was like devouring Korrasami kiss fix, and that was my introduction to fan fiction. And now I write Supercorp because you want to talk.
Nice.
It's so canon, and yet it's not on the pages, so it's like right in between there, because they queer baited us for 5 years, and you know it's there, but they never give them a kiss in the show. So
that's how I feel about my current ship. Except one of them is now canonically bi, so I can hold out hope that they might get together.
Nice. I still hold out hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I read through Supercorp, Way Hot, Korrasami, basically all the great lesbian fics.
So what you're hearing in the way that Kira's talking is that is a lot of ship names are portmanteaus, where you take part of one character's name and part of the other character's name and smush them together. That's how most characters. Although if you call it Spurk to anyone, just don't. Please just don't. It's Kirk Spock. We just call it Kirk Spock. Yeah. But I mentioned the Pokemon fandom. They would like find some random word that had to do with the ship and would like smack it on front of the word shipping. So like pearl shipping or rocket shipping, and like.
Well, yeah.
We think rocket shipping was the origin of that, but it was a whole thing.
Yeah, so I Waverly Earp and Nicole Hott from Winona Earp, and Supergirl and Lena Luthor from Supergirl, and then of course Korra and Asami from Legend of Korra. Those are and Bo and Lauren from Lost Girl.
Oh goodness, there's a flashback.
Yep. I love my shoes.
Very nice.
And I love the crossovers where you'll see, because Katie McGrath plays Lena Luthor in Supergirl, and people will write crossovers with her Morgana character on Merlin, and so you'll see Supergirl mixed with Merlin fics that are really usually pretty great.
Yep.
If people would
the way fans take canon and just like do things with it, it inspires me every day. like every so once, and I'm like, oh, I should read a physical book, and then I'm like, I read like the equivalent of 2 novels in like 4 days.
Yep.
I think I can be excused.
It's actually so through it was AO3. That's how I found out about the Carmilla web series, which I also love. Because someone wrote a mix of Supergirl and Carmilla, where Kara's just like determined to talk to the great big cat, and and Laura and Lena are just sitting there like, all right, those are our girls, and I was like, what is this? and it's and then I watched the series, which of course is basically a fan fiction of the original novella. And if you read the novella, I figured out, like, who doesn't know Dracula? Did you know Dracula is fan fiction?
I did not know that.
It's fan fiction off of the novella Carmilla, the original lesbian vampire story.
Oh,
But
the more you know.
But if you read the two, Dracula is a mask presentation of the same freaking story. Down to the written epistolary, and there's a big black cat and a big black dog. Like it's all fan fiction.
It's a gender bent fan fiction. That's fascinating.
Exactly.
Oh wow.
So I mean, there's something out there for everybody, because there is a fandom for everything. And
again, it's
porn for everyone.
Thanks for putting that on my presentation, Kira.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's okay. I still appreciate you. I'm just teasing. No, I mean it's a really incredible place to consume media. It's not all published level quality, but a lot of it is better than works that I've seen published. So,
agreed.
I think one of the things that I would like to see discussed, and maybe you can expand on this in your quills, but I think the presence of fan fiction has been the best thing available for people that are self-publishing, and self-publishing is sometimes the only way that people that are outside of the standards that publishers have to tell their stories. So I think I would like to see a study of like the upswing into fan fiction, and how that carried over to people self-publishing queer fiction.
No, that's a great question. I will do some research into that.
I should add that into my class next week.
And I agree, because I think fan fiction was on the vanguard of that, and I can see so many shows that we can say fan fiction made this possible.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a few years ago. I went to a writers' conference, and it was actually a very small one-time meeting of screenwriters in LA, and they basically like whispered under their breath that like, oh, don't say fan fiction out loud, because they're terrified of the idea that they're tearing their stories from the fan fiction, when we all know that they read it, because I've seen it play out before. But it definitely has changed. The popularity of fan fictions online has spurred people to write more queer friendly series.
I would agree with that. Yeah, racism is still definitely a problem in fandom. I will own that. We have some issues with racism in fandom, but homophobia, transphobia, those are less of an issue.
I've seen some great meta stories where the characters read fan fiction about themselves.
Love those.
Yeah.
Love those.
Well, like 80 for Brady, I'm just saying.
So meta.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I won't keep you too much longer. I know that we're finishing maybe a little early than planned, but like I said, I pulled a couple slides that weren't totally ready, so thank you for being my dry run for August. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. This has
Thank you.
been fantastic. Round of applause. We appreciate
Awesome.
you
Awesome.
coming and hanging
Yes.
out with us.
Oh, glad to. Glad to. And yeah, I have a writing with tarot class if you ever want me to come back and teach that. So.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. Stop
Oh.
recording.
Okay.
Do you want to stop recording? Yes.